Happy Wednesday. Good morning, PSW staff, clients and friends for our advanced class. Welcome. We looked at Bach yesterday. I gave you a little intro and I wanted you to pay attention to that class. The father of Western music, of Western classical music. And I was thinking about that this morning because probably most music today comes from Bach. Isn't that crazy? And we're talking about, he was born in 1685. 1685. That's 2 million years ago. No, but that's a long time ago. And he set up the structure. We're going to get into more Bach but we're going to also listen to the song from the 1960s that everyone knows too. And it's not Lover's Concerto because we played that in yesterday's class. It's another pop song, but mostly all of good music comes from Bach because he set the foundation for good bass lines, inversions, which we're going to take a look at some of these terms. And I know that not everybody reads music here, so that's okay. You don't need to, but I do want you to listen. Everyone can listen, right? So we're going to be taking some very simple 4 measures, just 4 bar lines of stepward, downward motion, and listen to how Bach did this and how he's one of the most, iconic composers, even if you don't like his music, although it's pretty hard not to like. It's very satisfying music. I mean, how could you not like this? So expanding on counterpoint, right? Different lines of melodies that go together that create melody and harmony at the same time, right? So just one line is not counterpoint. Counterpoint is more than one line, but they're not solo lines. They help support the melody by creating different lines. I mean, we don't think about counterpoint really today because we don't need to. When you have a band, when Paul McCartney and the Beatles write a song together, Paul finds his own bass line. He's creating counterpoint to support the melody, right? And it sometimes sounds like a solo, but it's completely to support the chord progressions. So when I say Bach was the first, he was harmonically, chord-wise, more innovative than a lot of previous composers. Because this is Baroque music, right? This is the early start of Baroque music. Not that he knew, he was just writing in the church, along with his brothers and cousins. Also dissonant chords. You're going to get some dissonant chords. Not the uncomfortable screeching dissonant chords, but chord progressions that jazz people will use hundreds of years later. Many harmonic possibilities that, as opposed to just the whole song is in C major. That's well and good, but he'll take you on all different keys where it's not going to sound like it's an exercise. It's going to sound like it's a beautiful adventure and stuff. So, and we know Baroque ornamentation, Baroque architecture, right? Baroque music is more, a lot of notes, just like a lot of, decorations on a house or a castle. So that's what it is. But, if you think of a lot of notes, it's hard to get all the right notes, right meaning consonant, pleasant hearing notes. How do you know which notes to choose? Because a lot of notes, just like it could be a mess, right? I want a lot of ornamentation on this house that I'm building. It could look like just a complete mess. So how do you know? Well, he uses good voice leading, which we'll look at in a second. So it's kind of like sewing machine music, some people, because it's semi-mechanical, but that's not all of his music. That's he wrote probably 1,000 pieces or something like that. So Bach explored kind of more challenging and sophisticated music rather than Vivaldi, a little bit more than Vivaldi and Handel, which are composers that we've talked about that we'll expand on later. And of course, he wasn't really appreciated in his lifetime until later, until Mendelssohn. And Mendelssohn, we did a class on, and Mendelssohn was just like, boy, this guy's great, but that was 100 years after or something like that. So, of course, as we know, did mostly all of this work on an organ because the piano was just invented right around his time, and it was still kind of like but the piano gives you what? It gives you volume, right? Velocity. An organ and a harpsichord, you just get one volume sound, which is great. Piano gives you more sensitivity and stuff. So let's just, we've heard inversions before. It's just a way that you respell a chord. So if you have a C chord, C, E, G is the most basic chord. First inversion, you just respell it where it's E, G, C. So it's the same exact notes. You're just replacing the root of the note. The root's always the bottom. You're just kind of rearranging it. Second inversion means the fifth. G is in the root at the bottom. That's just basic. So and what does this do? This provides more color to the chord. It's going to be a way to get into voice leading. Voice leading is going to be something that we're going to look at. So voice leading, it's a way to get from one chord to another chord. Because if you have a C to an A, okay, that's fine. But how do you get there with certain notes? How do you get to the places? That's what voice leading is. There's right ways, there's wrong ways. Now, you can just do, whatever sounds good. That's kind of but there were very specific rules to voice leading. There weren't, I won't get into it, but you can never do parallel fifths where if it's like a C and a G and then it's a D and an A right next to each other, you'd get castrated or ostracized for that because it didn't sound pleasant. So you would learn how to write, because the church made all these ridiculous, wonderful rules about this stuff. So if it's a way to get from one chord to another chord, voice leading, it can also be easier for musicians to play, because if you're going to a C chord to an A chord, how do you get there? You could go from C, B, that's right in between, to A, as opposed to C and A. You go to C, B, A. And then that could start your bass line, perhaps. And if we think of C and A, there's a common tone. Common tones are very common. It means the same note, right? So if we have a C and an A minor chord, the common note in that is C, because C is also in the C chord, of course, and C is also in the A minor chord. So that note doesn't change. So that's a common tone. And this is all going to make sense when we listen to some examples. Let's listen to his voice leading in the Goldberg Variations, one of his most famous pieces. This key is in the key of G, okay? And we just really have to look at the first four measures. If we just look, we'll take a quick listen and then we'll look at it. Beautiful, right? So let's go back to the first four measures. This is voice leading. This is stepwise motion. It's going from the G to the F sharp to the E to the D. Those are all just stepwise. There's no leaps involved, and those are inversions. Those are chords. So it's not a G chord and then it's not an F sharp chord. No, it's a G chord, but the F sharp is going to be playing the 5 chord. Well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I want you to hear that downward stepwise motion. Now, what does that have to do with music today? Because you're like, okay, that's fine. That was hundreds of years ago. Well, one of my favorite songs, God Only Knows, by the Beach Boys. Do you know that song?
I may not always love you, promise there are stars above you. You'll never need to doubt it, I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. If you should ever leave me, life would still go on, believe me. What good you're nothing to me, so what good would living do me? God only knows what I'd be without you.
Some people call that Baroque pop, but one of the best love songs ever written, one of the best pop songs written in off the Pet Sounds album. I mean, we could just take the last 4 bars of the first verse, and Brian Wilson is going to be doing the same thing that Bach does. Whether I think he was aware of that because he was listening to a lot of Bach. He said when he was writing this, but just listen to the last 4 bars. So from the key of E, because the song fluctuates from the key of A and E, from the key of E, measure 17 starts on an A, and then it goes downward. It goes A, right, to G, to F sharp, to E. That's the same stepward downward motion as Bach is doing in the Goldberg variations. It's getting you back to the root of you're ending on the root, but through stepwise voice leading and inversions of different chords. But it's sounding beautiful, right? I mean, it sounds very satisfying because the notes aren't leaping everywhere. It's just going nice stepwise motion downward to the root, or where the key of the song. So we could do hours and hours more at Bach, but just wanted to get in a little bit deeper, take deeper into some of these terms: inversion, voice leading. I just thought we should do that because really all Bach, the foundation of Bach's music is amazing. Even if you don't listen to Bach, it's so cool to think all the music we listen to now, pretty much all the music goes back to Bach, in the sense of bass lines, in the sense of chord progressions, inversion chords. People do all this stuff without knowing Bach. You don't need to know Bach, but it's very cool to see this all came from hundreds of years ago, whether it's Taylor Swift, whether it's The Clash or something like any pop band. Chord progressions, all these things. People were doing it before. We looked at Monteverdi. I mean, that was Renaissance music, but we weren't quite up to for lack of a better word, the song structure. Those were songs, on a guitar and stuff, but Bach really created the structure of, verse, chorus, perhaps, but it just became not better, but with Bach, everything fell into place where he had no idea he was doing this. That's what's good. You just keep working, and perhaps you'll change the world with your work. You don't know. You just have to keep working. Okay. I think that was good, right? I mean, that was a lot to chew, but we're going to have fun tomorrow. And again, Happy New Year, even though we're in the second week of it. And I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.